Behavioral economics is a wide spectrum, and it's a mixture of the psychology and business. We got two parts to it, and I'm going to not make it directly linked to what's set up there, but more or less. So why do we make irrational decisions? So today's focus is going to be on the first question, and then next week when I see you, what we can do to nudge ourselves to make better decisions. So I'm going to explain to you kind of why do we make irrational decisions, because we do. And even if you know what you're doing, it's hard to change out of that. But I'm going to take you through those two things. So what is behavioral economics? And behavioral economics is a lot of things, and you'll hear a lot of terms. They talk about herding, they'll talk about loss aversion, overconfidence, rule of thumbs, mental accounting. And so it encompasses a lot of things. And on the last count, I saw kind of 600 different terms that were given to behavioral economics. So just briefly, a couple of things. Herding, for instance, is we herd like animals. In other words, when one person does something, another person will follow, and all of a sudden, we are all doing the same thing, even though we don't really understand what's happening, and we're not making the decisions ourselves anymore. We're just following what everybody else is doing. Loss aversion is a aspect of we fear more to lose something than to gain something. So we will often make irrational decisions based on that we don't want to lose. The chance of winning might be double the chance of losing, but we kind of make the irrational decision because we're more scared of losing than we benefit from the winning. And then again, rules of thumb. We have lots of these rules of thumbs that we have all created during our lives that we've learned. And then we kind of run our lives according to what worked previously, but maybe doesn't work anymore. And we don't ask ourselves if that works or doesn't work. So here's an example. Here's an advert. You might be looking for VPN. You go onto this. It's an advert. It tells you there's 3 months for free, which is also a behavioral economics concept of the concept of free. When you hear something for free, there's kind of no downside to it. So we often go for it. But the most important part and how we get fooled to make irrational decisions, let's say you look at this and you think, no, I don't really want to get this right now. And you've got a big red button that says get ExpressVPN now. What's your other choice? Your other choice is not, no, I don't want to get VPN. The other choice is, no, I don't want online safety. Now, you're looking at this because having that online safety is important to you. And now you have to push a button that says you want the exact opposite. And it's kind of like you're almost fearful to hit that, no, I don't want online safety. And even if you don't want this, there's a good chance you'll say, it's for free, it's for 3 months, let me try it. Because that's how we get persuaded or nudged, a term of behavioral economics. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more later on. So we live our lives in default. We are doing things and making decisions that we think are based on our own thoughts and choices, when in reality, we are being influenced continuously, both intentionally and unintentionally, by every single thing around us. So what happens is we're faced with different situations and we've got to make a decision, and we make the decision, or we think we're making the decision, but we're not really making the decision. The decision is made by what's influencing us around us continuously. So we think we're in the driver's seat, but maybe we're not. And I'm going to unpack a little bit of that as we go along. So just standard economics was based on the concept that all human decisions are rational, and we're motivated by an accurate concept of what things are worth, and things have what we call utility. And if any of you studied economics, you know the term utility. And the rational person looks at what we're getting, what's it costing us, and we make that decision. In reality, that is not the case. In reality, we have all these other influences where sometimes we make an irrational decision. In fact, often we just follow the herd. So behavioral economics is that intersection between economics and psychology. That's where it fits in. It's partly economics, but where pure economics doesn't bring the psychology into it, behavioral economics combines those two. So we make systematic mistakes in our decision making. So it's a way of understanding, first of all, what are those mistakes that we make? And then what can we maybe put in place to, number one, be aware of it, and then number two, to now start finding ways to make less irrational mistakes, decisions. And I'm going to talk, there's a very specific thing of where it's just a gut reaction and we react on our gut reaction, and that's incorrect. So I'm going to talk you through that just now. And how can you use behavioral economics? We can put it in place because I'm sure some, if not all of this matches most of us. Why don't we save enough money for retirement? We say we're going to save and then we don't. Why do we say we're on diet and then we overeat? Why do we say we want to exercise and be fit, but we don't do enough? We often buy things that we actually don't need. And why do we lie and still say we're being honest? And if you're honest with yourself, you'll understand that. So it's kind of like, and these are just a few of the questions where we, in our mind, we have a concept of ourselves, but in reality, we behave differently. And we behave differently because we're being pushed into those different areas. Behavioral economics has gained a lot of credibility in the last while. In 2002, Daniel Kahneman, and he wrote that book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, used some of the concepts. And so he won. And I find it ironic that he won the Nobel Economics Prize in 2002, where in fact, behavioral economics is almost like anti-economics. And then recently in 2017, Richard Thaler also won the Nobel Economics Prize, again, for behavioral economics. And he wrote a book called Nudge. His book was suggesting that we need to make very small interventions in the environment to encourage people to make the right decision. And the cover of his book, as you can see in the yellow, is a figure of an elephant pushing a baby elephant. And he called the book Nudge. His working title, and excuse it, but right at the bottom, you can see he had the title Stupid Shit That People Do. And it's because we do this. And the reason he's got the concept, the picture of an elephant, is a mother elephant will push the baby elephant to where the mother elephant wants that baby elephant to go. But it won't just push it too hard. It'll give it a little nudge. And that's where the term nudge comes from. But it'll also nudge it only to do things that are good for the baby elephant. So behavioral economics is not around manipulation. It's not around finding ways where we can convince and influence people to do things that are bad for them. It's around doing things that are good for them, but would also be good for us. So if you're a company and you employ some of these behavioral economics concepts, you're doing something that's good for your client and happens to be good for you as well. We got a fantastic example of this in South Africa, and I think Discovery are doing it exceptionally well and trying many, many different ways of incorporating this in. In fact, just going from Discovery Health into Discovery Bank, they're actually calling themselves the Behavioral Bank, and it's from Behavioral Economics, where they're trying to encourage you to do some of the good things. And I think they're doing it well mostly. A couple of areas where maybe they could improve on, but that's life in general. So an example of, let's say, Discovery Health, what they do is they want you to be healthy. Why do they want you to be healthy? Because it's good for them if you're healthy. So you go onto their scheme, you're paying medical aid fees. If you keep fit, there's a better chance you're going to be healthy. there's a better chance you're going to spend less money for medications. That's good for them. But it's also good for you if you're keeping healthy. So there's that win-win situation. And behavioral economics is around looking in the long term, looking at what the long-term outcome is, but putting into place some of the short-term interventions that will encourage you to behave in a way that supports that it encourages you to make the right steps for the long-term goal, even if we forget to look at the long-term goal. Because we often have a goal, we forget about the long-term goal. But if we can put short-term goals in place, that keeps us on track towards our long-term goal. And it's all around, how does the mind work? I like this, how do you work? And the brain says, I've got no idea. And it's true. We think we know, but we have no idea really. So we look at the concept of behavioral economics, and one of the core concepts is that there are two systems in place. We've got the rational and we've got the emotional. The one is what we call the fast thinking, the other is the slow thinking. Some people look at it in terms of this. I prefer to look at it, although they're both in the brain like this, but I like to think of it, are you in your head or are you in your heart? Are you thinking or are you feeling? Your rational behavior is the slow thinking. Your rational behavior is controlled. You look at a situation, you step back, you think about it. It's very good for a new concept or a new situation. If you're in a brand new situation, you got to step back and think, how does this work? How does that work? The emotional, the fast, is that automatic reaction. And that's habitual behavior. That is where we just behave on instinct. They are both crucial for survival. The quick behavior is around always kind of like just immediate response. You come to it, you're driving in a car, you come to a traffic light, it's red. You don't drive up and start thinking, what does red mean? And then you find out what it means. It means stop. So I've got to now take my foot and I've got to put it on this middle pedal to slow. We don't think that. When you started driving, I'm sure a lot of you, when you started driving, you found it impossible to kind of look out the mirror, look out the window, keep your hand on the steering wheel, change gears and look where your foot is going. It was impossible to start off with. But once you learned that, you now do that, and you smoke a cigarette and you're on the phone at the same time. So we learn these behaviors that are just automatic behaviors. Now we've got to be careful that we don't use these automatic behaviors in situations where they shouldn't be used. And so from the emotional point of view, we have reaction. It's important. So a concept that is always given, if we were years ago and we're in the jungle and you get chased by a lion, you don't have to sit and think, I wonder how big the teeth are and I wonder if this thing's going to chase me. You just run. That's your instinctual behavior. The rational behavior is when it's a new situation. The problem is we sometimes use the emotional behavior in the irrational situation. What we say is follow your heart, but take your brain with you. So in other words, go with your gut feel, but think about it as well. And sometimes swap around. And the words that we use give an indication of what we're using. In other words, maybe some of you have been in a situation where you're driving in a car, somebody pulls in front of you, you start shouting and swearing and hooting at them. And then the person in the car with you looks at you and says, what were you thinking? What was that about? And the answer is, you were not thinking. You were feeling. That's why the person might say to you, are you out of your mind? Can you see the words that we use are actually indicating it? What were you thinking? I wasn't. I was feeling. Are you out of your mind? Yes, I'm out of my mind. I'm in my heart. I'm in my emotions. And we cannot operate with both of those operating at the exact same time. So I want to show you a little clip around this, and I'll pack it for you. It was a couple of years ago, Serena Williams was playing tennis, and it was a Grand Slam final, and she was playing Naomi Osaka, and she had a meltdown. And I want to show you how the meltdown affected the rest of her game and how she was out of her mind. She was in her heart. She was in the feeling. So here she's playing Naomi Osaka. Naomi Osaka is leading. Serena Williams was meant to win this quite easily, and you will see what happens as we go along.
Code violation, coaching, warning, Mrs. Williams.
If he gives me a thumbs up, he's telling me to come on. We don't have any code, and I know you don't know that, and I understand why you may have thought that was coaching, but I'm telling you it's not. I don't cheat to win. I'd rather lose. I'm just letting you know.
So she gets accused of cheating. By the way, the coach afterwards mentioned that he was coaching her, which you're not allowed to do. She now has a look. She gets a code violation. It's a standard thing in tennis. You don't lose a point for it, but it's a code violation. She's just had her first baby. This is important for her. She doesn't want to teach her kid anything wrong. And she mentions that later on. So she goes through and says, in a calm way, I don't cheat. He never accused her really of cheating. It was coaching, but it's now an emotional thing within her. Watch how this unfolds as we go on. I just want to play that little bit again, just so you can see it.
But I'm telling you it's not. I don't cheat to win. I'd rather lose. I'm just letting you know.
Violation, racket abuse, point penalty, Mrs. Williams.
So she was now ahead in that second set. She then plays a bad shot. She gets upset. She breaks her racket. Whether the previous thing is still in her mind, we don't know, but she breaks a racket. Breaking a racket in tennis is a code violation. It's a standard thing. She's already had one code violation, so now the next one up is a point deduction. So she gets a point deducted because now she's overreacted. It would have just been a code violation normally.
You owe me an apology. I have never cheated in my life. I have a daughter and I stand what's right for her, and I've never cheated. And you owe me an apology.
So can you see how she's going back to the previous point? You owe me an apology. That apology is on the very first thing. And you can see now she was very controlled in the beginning. She's more and more worked up. Breaking a racket, the umpire's got no option but to give that next code violation. But she's harping and going back to that first thing. And I'm sure it affects her game as it goes along.
You owe me an apology. You will never, ever, ever be on another court of mine as long as you live. You are the liar. And you stole a point from me. You're a thief too.
Code violation, verbal abuse, game penalty, Mrs. Williams.
So now she's sitting there and continues having a go at the umpire, and then it's verbal abuse. And the verbal abuse, then she loses now a game, and then she lost the whole tournament because of that. So what I'm trying to illustrate over here is just the fact that stayed on in her mind continuously.
Second Osaka, 6-2.
So she goes on and loses the match. The build-up from doing something, being accused of something, that's staying in your head. She handled it calmly beginning, and then it gets more and more and more emotional. And the question is, do we do the same thing? Have we done the same thing? This is just very obvious to see because it's been captured on TV, but we all kind of do this in different ways. So I want to do a little thing with you guys. Here's a picture of it's a negative picture. I want you to look, and I'm going to ask you to focus on this for 30 seconds. What I want you to do is look at the picture, try keep your eyes open, follow on, please focus on those, the red, the green, and the blue dot. Follow on the color, focus on the colored dots. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Keep your eyes open. Look at it. You can blink, but try and blink as little as possible while you're looking at that. Got another 15 seconds. Just focus on it. Okay, now I want you to look up at your ceiling and blink as fast as possible while you're looking at the ceiling. Look up at the ceiling and blink as fast as possible. And then can somebody who saw anything on their ceiling, please turn on your mic and mute yourself and tell me what you saw.
So my ceiling.
You saw your ceiling, Ellis?
Yes.
You didn't see anything else?
Yeah, I did see something. Yeah.
France, what did you see?
No, I saw the picture.
What picture did you see, France?
The exact picture that I was watching, and then when I just went up while blinking, I saw the same image. Yeah?
Okay, and was it in color or in black and white?
It was in color.
In color.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Mine was in black and white.
Anyone else? I see someone else.
Sean has said he also saw the full color picture.
Yeah. Did most of you see it or not? Maybe I didn't.
Yes, Dave, I also saw it in color and the picture.
Right. Excellent. Thanks. So guys, what is happening? Just try and explain that to me. You've got a negative picture here with a couple of dots. You focus for 30 seconds, and Ellis, maybe we need to do this again another time. But if you look up at your ceiling and you blink very fast, that picture has moved from the screen in front of you to your ceiling, and it's in color. How the hell can that be? Anyone want to try and explain that? How can that be?
Okay, can I?
Yes, Franz?
Yeah, I think it's what you've stated about our habitual behavior, like what our eyes is used to envision in most of the time. So when I just turned what I was looking at, my mind automatically built what I'm used to seeing on a daily basis.
Great, excellent. I like your explanation. Thanks, Franz. And so what Franz is actually saying is that our brains are so powerful that we have the ability to make things up. And I use that term, but you make stuff up. We stuff up because we're taking one thing, we're looking somewhere else, and we're interpreting it in our own ways. Now, some of you would see it in color. Some of you maybe don't see it at all. But our minds are so powerful that we take it away and we put it somewhere else, and it's in color. And now we think we can interpret reality. In your reality, that picture is on your ceiling. In another reality, it's not there at all. And we do that with things continuously. When we interact with people, when we discuss things with people, we are hearing what they're saying, but we're making stuff up. We're adding to it. We're looking at through filters, and we are interpreting it in a complete different way. Here's a picture of the Kruger National Park, and you got these giraffe, and we often go to the Kruger Park because we enjoy it. And we enjoy watching the animals. If you watch the animals very carefully, they are not enjoying it at all. These giraffe are standing there looking around. What are they looking for? They're looking for a potential predator. They're looking for where the next threat is coming from. They spend their entire lives walking around fearful, looking for that next threat. We are wired the same way. We are wired to look where that next threat is coming from. And like that picture, we can make things up. And so we often have people who are successful in business because they don't see the risks. I don't know if you've heard of it, where some very, very successful business people, and you ask them, why do you become successful? And they said, I was too young to know any different. Because they don't look or focus for the risks. And you see what you focus on. Yes, it is important to focus on the risks, but we are already wired to focus on the risks. We have to consciously focus on the things that are not the risks. We got to try and focus more on the things that are the opportunities. So that's where we got to change things. And I'll give you a couple of things when I see you next week around maybe what are the tools we can use to try and do that. But it is natural to look for the faults. It is natural to look for what could go wrong. We have to also and train ourselves to look for what could go right. Another little picture I saw. What do you see there when you look at that? Sensodyne protects. What? Anybody see teeth?
Yeah.
Caps.
Yeah.
Helmets.
Yes.
Helmets, top and bottom.
Correct.
Facing each other.
Correct. Thanks, Odette. When we see things differently, we see different things. And it's about looking at something that we've looked at always and saying, how can I now see that in a different light? How can I see that differently? And this is quite a nice image, I think, because it's got kind of layers. Sensodyne protects your teeth and the helmets protect you. But if you just look at it initially, it just looks like teeth. And maybe you can see the helmets a lot clearer in this picture. When it was smaller, it was harder to do that. So I want to do a little exercise with you. And I was going to run it on something called slido.com, but Laurie, are you able to put up the poll? The first one, the
Yes,
A or B?
yes, sure.
Okay. Guys, Laurie's going to put up a poll just now. You need to answer just A or B. And the A or B is based on this question. Which of the following would you prefer? There's no right or wrong answer, by the way. This is just a poll. I want to see what your responses are. So there's no right or wrong answer. Which would you prefer the following? A certain win of 2,500 Rand, or B, a 25% chance to win 10,000 Rand and a 75% chance to win nothing? Just select A or B.
Okay.
So in the poll. Okay. Laurie, what's the result of the poll? So 65% said A and 35% said B. Great. Excellent. Laurie, if I can ask you to put up the next poll. And the next poll is just to look at C or D. So I'm going to ask you some more questions here. And these are your questions. Which of the following would you prefer? A certain loss of 7,500 or a 75% chance to lose 10,000 and only a 25% chance to lose nothing? Again, which one would you choose? And just select C or D. And now 32% say C and 68% say D. Right. Thank you. So these were the questions I asked you. And Kahneman and Tversky did what they called prospect theory. Their work shows that responses are different if the questions are framed in a different way. If it's framed as a gain or a loss. We dislike losses more than we like an equivalent gain. Giving up something is more painful than the pleasure we receive from getting something. And so when faced with the first type of decision, a greater portion of people will opt for A, which you did, 65%, while the second problem, people will more likely choose D, which you did. So it was 65% A, 68% D. The interesting thing around this question is it is exactly the same question. We're asking exactly the same thing. The alternative is exactly the same. It's just the way it has been phrased will change the perception of it. And what I was telling you, that we are anti-loss more than pro-gain, shows it in the results that we've just got now. And I've run this many, many times, and the results are almost identical every time. And it just shows, just the way it's been phrased changes your perception. A certain loss, to have a certain loss of 7,500, that doesn't sound right. Remember that VPN story I gave you where you don't want protection? It's hard to push that button. This is the same thing. And this, so again, need to be aware of it, of how we frame questions to others, but more important, how we frame it to ourselves. So just in terms of behavioral economics concepts, there are hundreds of them. These are just some of them alphabetically. It only goes up to D and not even the whole of D. All sorts of, there's a heuristic effect. There's anchoring. I'll talk about anchoring a little bit later. There's authority bias. There are many different things. We obviously can't go through all of these, but I'm going to pick out a couple of them and we'll talk about them. Why are we doing this and why am I discussing this and maybe why it's interesting is I want to use behavioral economics to prevent myself from making the same mistakes as I see others doing. And my second hope, avoid putting myself into a situation where I can make that mistake. In other words, if I am on diet, don't have a lot of chocolates in the house. If I go out for dinner, maybe tell the waiter not to offer me desserts at the end. Put yourself in a position that allows you to make the better decision. They did some research in a university, they call it a canteen at one of the universities in America. And what they did is they wanted to promote healthy eating. So they did a study where they had posters everywhere telling people to eat healthy. And on the other side, they had no posters, but they laid out the food differently. So in the first one, all the unhealthy stuff was available and all the healthy stuff was behind the counter. In the other canteen, they had all the fruits in the front and all the sweets and everything behind the counter. And if you wanted a chocolate, you'd have to actually go and ask for it. And people bought and asked for it, but the numbers were drastically different. And again, they were trying to prove that if you want to be successful, put things in place that allow you to be successful. Make it easier to do the right things, make it harder to do the wrong things. And the right and the wrong are what you're choosing is right or wrong. For whatever the right is, whatever you want to achieve. Okay. The bold choices and how we do things are based on the questions we ask. And the way you ask a question will presuppose how you give the answer. The same way as we did with this exercise of the A and the B. You could see that the same question asked in different ways got opposite answers. And what I mean with this is, let's say you're not succeeding in something. There's a technique that if you want to achieve something, what you should do is you should ask yourself the question, or if you don't know an answer to something, ask yourself the question, go to bed with a pen and paper next to your bed, and when you wake up in the morning, you will have all these different answers. So let's say you're not succeeding at work or not succeeding at something. You can go to bed and say to yourself, why am I not succeeding? And when you wake up in the morning, you will have many answers that you can write down of why you're not succeeding. And the answers could vary from you don't know how to do it, you're useless, you've never achieved things, blah, blah, blah. All these things, your brain will tell you why you're not achieving stuff because that's what you've asked. You could go to bed and ask yourself a better question. And the better question would be, what can I do to be successful in the future? Or I'm not achieving this. What can I do to make it a success? And then you will wake up with a whole different set of answers. So we think we're asking the same question, but I hope you're understanding the subtlety in the questions. The one is, why am I not succeeding? You'll get those answers. What can I do to succeed? You'll get a whole different set of answers. And if there's one thing that you take out of today's talk, it's this, and I'd like you to practice this and to try and ask yourself different questions and get the different answers. And not all those answers will work, but it gives you a better set to deal with. Behavioral economics is a newish term. It's not a new concept. This has been around forever. Henry Ford used that, so he's famous for saying you can have any color you like as long as it's black when he was making the first cars. Do you know that he was the first guy to give his workers both Saturday and Sunday off? And what he hoped was that the extra time off would encourage them to use motor vehicles. He was nudging people to use motor vehicles. We've all heard of the Michelin guide for restaurants, with the top restaurants. Why is it the Michelin guide? Michelin are tires, because the Michelin guide of restaurants was created by the Michelin tire brothers. And what they did is they set up this guide of restaurants. It was originally in Paris, but all the restaurants that were high up on the Michelin guide were ones that were just outside Paris. So you would have to travel there. Again, nudging you to travel more and encourage more road trips and therefore use more of their tires. Another concept where we look at is relativity. And I want you to have a look at this. And if you look at it, and honestly, if you say, it looks as if this orange circle is bigger than this orange circle. And if I drag this orange circle across, can't get it exact, but you can see that it's actually not. It's exactly the same size. Things look bigger or smaller compared to the environment that it's in. Things look better or worse compared to what you are comparing things to. And we do this all the time. We do it instinctively. Everything we do is in comparison to something else. Let me show you a couple more examples of this. So I just saw this joke. I thought it was quite clever. The snail sitting on the back of a tortoise is saying, slow down, you move too fast, because it's all relative. Here's another one, a table. Which table is longer, A or B? Most people would say A. If I take this, and I can show you the length, and if I go to the A, which is longer, as we can obviously see, and if I twist this around, it is exactly the same. So if you answered A or B, you were wrong. And then I nudged you or shoved you into giving the wrong answer. So the A and the B is exactly the same length. It doesn't look like it. And I've proved it to you. But when I take this proof away, the illusion comes back. And you can see that they really don't look the same. That's how our minds are fooling us. Things that we think are obvious might not be that obvious. And I use the term, I shoved you into making the wrong decision. There's the nudge, which is pushing you to things that are good for both of you. There's also something called the shove. And the shove is when you shove somebody to make a decision or do something that's bad for them, but it's good for you. And one has to steer away, obviously, from those things. I want to show you one more thing from this, and then I want to conclude with a message. So here we've got, and hopefully you'll be able to see this, you've got two Rubik's Cubes. The one on the right looks yellowy orange. The one on the left is brown. And if I now take the surrounding away from the brown one, it now becomes the same color as the other one. And things that look completely different are now identical. And if I put these things back, that illusion now comes back. And here's the point around this. Dan Ariely, who's kind of like the guru of behavioral economics, or one of the gurus of behavioral economics, he wrote a book called Predictably Irrational, says that our intuition is fooling us in a repeatable, predictable, and consistent way, again and again and again. And you can go and do this yourself, and you will get the same results. One of the things that we do the most of as humans is eyesight. We do it better than any of the other senses, our eyesight. Our eyesight is what we get the most of. And if we can be fooled so easily with the eyesight, then how else are we being fooled that are easier to fool us? So I'm going to leave you on that note. And what I'm going to do when I see you next week is I'm going to now unpack how people are doing it and how we fooled, so that you become aware of it and what are the different techniques. And then once you're aware of something, it can become more of a choice than not. Is show you a little study that was done. So this was The Economist. The Economist offered a subscription to their magazine. Now you could take just The Economist on its own for $59, or you could get the print and web together for $125. Or if you only wanted the print, $125. Now, can you see this third option in the middle is useless? Because why would anybody go for the print one? Because you get the subscription for free. So this was a real advert that was run by The Economist, and someone wrote in and said to them, why have you got that third option? It makes no sense. And then they took the third option away rather than answering the question. And so they ran an example and tested people on this. And here's the outcome. When all three options were available, 16% of the people went for subscription only. 84% went for the web and the subscription together. When they took that middle option away, so you could only choose the one or the offer, because why would you put the middle one in? No one wants it. So you took out the middle one, and it changed completely. 68% went for the A, and only 32% went for the B, for the C. And what this is showing us, that middle option, which is useless in its own, is shifting and prompting you to move more towards one of the other options. Because it's closer to the other option, we can look at those in relative terms and choose the better one from relatively, and web and print compared to just print is much better. And so this is what we call in behavioral economics called the decoy effect. By putting that third option in, it's the decoy, but it actually prompts you to make a decision that otherwise you would have made a different decision. So that's where I want to leave it for today. And now we'll go into more examples like this. but I'm open to any questions. Anyone got any questions?
He's
David,
still
maybe just
to
say, hi. This was really, really interesting. I just want to say that, there's a lot of businesses on the call. So, in addition to the fact that we want to make sure we are aware of it, to avoid maybe making those decisions irrational, it's also a way for us to look from a business point of view, how to utilize it from a marketing point of view, from selling point of view, and so on. I think to look at it at both eyes.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for that. And yeah, one must do that. One must always keep in mind that however you're using it, it's a nudge, not a shove, because your audience or your customers will feel if it's a shove, and if it's a nudge, you're doing something that's good for both of you.
Thanks, David. It's Sean. How's it? It was an awesome lecture. It also shows us, like, our environment says that we must always be asleep on a Monday, and Monday's like this dreary day. But you showed us, if you put yourself in the right perspective, you can actually have a great wake-up session on a Monday.
Excellent. I don't know who told you to sleep on a Monday, but I didn't get that message. Thanks, Sean.
Hi,
Great.
Dave. It's
Hi.
Josh here. Question for you. Do you think behavioral economics applies differently when in a B2B situation rather than a B2C?
No. So for those who aren't aware, B2B is business to business and B2C is business to consumer. Josh, it doesn't. B2B will work exactly the same. The person who you're dealing with on the other side of the business is also a person. So it's the same. They're also influenced by the same things. And next week, what I'll show you is the biases, how we have biases and how they change what we see. We think we see something when it's actually different, as I've started to show you. So yeah, to answer your question, it works the same. As long as you're dealing from a person to a person, it's the same aspect.
Thanks, Dave. And also thanks for the presentation. Loved it as always. Just one last thing. From the discovery comment that you made with Vitality, do you think, I mean, a personal opinion, obviously no right or wrong answer, but do you believe that they are doing better in customer retention than actual improvement of health and wellness? Just from what I've heard is that it's only the top couple percent of Vitality people in terms of health that are actually benefiting from it, where they're struggling to get the people that are really unhealthy or on the borderline to get into the Vitality program. So what do you think?
So I think where they're coming from is a good place and trying to get people to achieve it. I don't know based on your comments, I don't know the facts behind it, if they are or not, as you say, but it might be a case of it's difficult to get the people on the road. And once you get on the road and then they can start prompting you, if people are not joining Vitality, then they're not making use of it. And it might be, it might be just the way it's perceived. I don't think, maybe a lot of people don't really understand what the Vitality concept is. I know for me personally, if I talk from a personal point of view, it's definitely had an impact on me in terms of my fitness. I always say I'm fit. I always pretend I'm fit, but I haven't always done what I needed to do. I know that if I need another 100 points or 200 points at the end of the week, and their week ends on a Friday, I'm on my bicycle cycling to get those extra points. It's without a doubt, it has impacted on me. So as a population of one, I know that it's definitely pushed me to be fit and